Welcome to a football show Monday edition. Paul Kuharsky, Braden, Gall, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Once again, the joke's getting pretty old, Paul, about needing to drink while watching a Titans game. So don't drive, Uber Eats, search Sinkers Beverages, and have the booze delivered directly to your house. Look, we joked. You joked, and I said, man, one of the worst games I've ever seen in Nissan Stadium. Jacksonville, 10-6 win over the Titans a few weeks ago in front of very few fans. And you said, be careful. Just don't be a prisoner of the moment. And while the Titans had 291 yards passing, the best of the day, the best of the season, almost 400 yards of offense, 27 points, all, you would argue, solid offensive numbers. The quarterback got benched. They gave up almost 40 points in a game that featured 10 turnovers and a swing in the middle eight, as they say, PK, the last four of the first half and the first four of the second half that basically ended the Titans' chances at an upset over the Cincinnati Bengals. How are you, sir? How are you?
Well, that middle eight should have favored the Titans. They had the ball. They had the ball positioned to go score at the end of the first half, and they were getting the second half kickoff. Titans have designated Colton Gall for his practice window coming off his ACL surgery last year. Callahan told us that was going to happen, so that's what I was just tweeting. But I don't think Gall will show up in a game this year, but he's going to return to practice, which is a nice story for him, and will be in the mix of receivers next year, which the Titans don't have many under contract. So that's a development to look forward to down the road.
There you go. Redemption says, Dr. Braden, Dr. Kuharsky, nice to see you again for my weekly therapy session. If you want to get involved in the comment section, please do so. There you go. Eddie says, Colton Dowell, Bryce Oliver breakouts games going to hit like crack. Okay, Eddie. That's a fair point. Make sure you turn on the notifications on YouTube, thumbs up, rate, review, subscribe on the podcast app of choice, etc., and go support good quality local businesses like Sinkers Beverages, like Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, open from Wednesday to Sunday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And, of course, other good small businesses like paulkarsky.com. Make sure you go check that out. We'll get to what you got coming up on the website there. So, obviously, Levis getting benched is the story here. So, we'll talk about what we saw, the mistakes, sort of the amount of – I know Callahan sort of uses the phrase like, you know, every interception has a different like life cycle, and there's different blames that go around for all these different turnovers. So we'll sort of talk through the future of Levis after we get to the game from yesterday. And I want to not to belabor the point, Paul, or to discourage Titans fans in any capacity, but I was sitting with JT in the press box, and he gave me a stat yesterday after the first half, and we were doing some math on it. There have been 4 times this entire season in which an NFL quarterback had 3 turnovers and no touchdowns in a half of football. So if you do the math on roughly 15 games per weekend, roughly, give or take. I know there's some that have more and some that have a few less, but ballpark, 15 weeks, 15 games times 4, because that's the number of halves a quarterback plays in each game, right? 2 quarterbacks, 2 halves each. You're talking about 900, roughly, ballpark, 900 incidents or opportunities for a quarterback to have 3 turnovers and a half with no touchdowns. It has happened 4 times out of those 900 this season. Kirk Cousins has 1, Mac Jones has 1, and Will Levis has 2. And he now has 12 interceptions, 5 lost fumbles. That is 17 turnovers. I don't think that's number 1, but I think it's pretty close. And then 8 fumbles total. Just a very different type of feel and play from him.
4 pick sixes.
4 pick sixes. And we'll get to how it impacted the game because it was the reason the team lost the game this time. You can't say Will Levis played well and the team didn't play well around him. I thought they played well to start. They ran the football. They created a turnover. They got the lead. I felt like they could play with this team because the defense for Cincinnati is so bad. And then that last 5 minutes of the first half, just a total debacle that I think might stain Will Levis's career or whatever he's got whatever kind of career he's going to have. So
didn't matter that they played well early, obviously. So, I mean, there have been a couple games this year where they hung for short period of time that felt nice. They did it with Detroit for a little bit and felt nice, and turned out, in Detroit, they were down 3 touchdowns by halftime. So that short feeling was a short feeling. I'm a little bit, I don't want to say I'm surprised. And I think people, I was on the radio for a little bit this morning, and Rexrod and I were both getting bashed as Will Levis apologists, but I don't know that a 4-turnover terrible Sunday is like definitively the line that ends Will Levis, and that, like, as Twitter seems to indicate, Will Levis can never play for the Titans again, and this is the end. Like, he should be cut this afternoon. I think transactions just went in. He has not, in fact, been cut today. Nor will he be cut in the remainder of the season. And he's going to be on the roster next year in 95% certainty. And now if he's a starter or not remains to be seen. But that is still alive as a possibility as well. He had played some better football for a while, and then he made some bad decisions against Jacksonville and missed some open receivers. And then he was horrible yesterday. But again, it's very easy for fans to want to be punitive for that awful game. And it unquestionably was an awful game. But it does not do anything to make finding a replacement for him any easier. The draft is not full of easily attainable, automatically better players. Free agency offers very little. Really, one guy who is definitely better, and even his resume, Sam Darnold, is not a long one. And then you get into talking trades, and those trades are for not certainties, which would also include giving up the draft picks that would solve a lot of the issues that are hurting Will Levis or anybody that's replacing Will Levis.
There's just not a lot of quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins probably famously the most high profile of all of the quarterbacks that just change teams. There's a lot of Hall of Famers that change teams.
Be available.
And leading the NFL in interceptions more than Will Levis. If you're a Hall of Famer, there's lots of evidence. Almost every single one of them plays on a second team, right? Like, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Montana. You go on and on down the list. They all play on a team at the very end of their career. They're not willing to hang it up yet, and they get an extra year or two somewhere else. Some of them play very well and win championships. Peyton and Tom. Otherwise, you just don't get quarterbacks not through the draft. Like that's where you get a quarterback. And so I do think I've been on the. I'm checking my notes here, Paul, but in fact it is true. I can confirm that Will Levis has not been cut, and that Amy Adams also has not sold the team. That hasn't happened either. She is the owner of the team, and no one can make her do with her toy what she wants to do with her toy. A couple of comments here. Ed, that's my favorite incredulous Paul Kuharsky again is, guys, on the Paul Kuharsky podcast after each game, guys, Amy Adams Strunk had a good franchise a couple of years ago and is not giving up a money-making machine that was in her family for generations. What are we doing? It's my favorite, PK.
That's true.
Ed says, I was always patient with Levis and wanted to make sure he got every opportunity to succeed. This just feels like rock bottom, and I'm usually an optimist. Eddie says, it sounds like Drew Aller from Penn State is going to go back to school. Sounds like we don't know that officially, but his backup has announced he's going to go into the portal. So the quarterback class is awful. Edge in 2025, quarterback in 2026. There you go. Is Garrett Nussmeier from LSU already announced he's coming back to school? Did I miss that?
I think he has.
Maybe I missed that. Predemption says, Henry, I've never, talking to Ed, I've never been this depressed about the Titans and the Preds at the same time. So just a lot of really positive, upbeat information in the comments.
Holiday joy.
So my first reaction to Levis getting benched was players have bad games and they get benched. That's what happens. I didn't think that it was going to lead to a change at the quarterback position for the rest of the season. And we'll get to the merits of that and what that means, because you guys had a couple of questions with Brian Callahan today about like sort of the strategy behind making that decision. It sounds like Brian says he's going to need a couple of days before he makes the decision on the quarterback, which I think is totally fine to say. Let's play his responses to some of y'all's questions first, and then let's get into the debate about the future of Levis here. All right, so there was a couple of follow-ups. So this is the first one. in which he is describing sort of the locker room dynamics that must be considered when benching a player in general. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay, here was his first response today as it pertains to that conversation.
I think there's the the guys in the football team want to feel like we're all held to the same standard, and that's the biggest issue you face is there's a locker room component to all these things and a team component to it. So you try to do best by all players involved, and the guys getting ready to go play games on Sundays want to feel like we're going to put them in position to win, and that's ultimately where that's my job as a coach and our job as a coaching staff to do that. So as far as one singular player development versus all the other stuff, those things aren't what we're focused on right now. At the end of the day, we're trying to put together the best possible performances in 3 games left in this season, and then we'll move into the offseason part of it.
All right, so that was his first comment. Any reaction to that, Paul?
Well, yeah, I would say, part of the discussion we were having in the press room after that is, does that have to apply to quarterback on this team right now? Like, Jaquan Jackson was benched for being a bad kick returner and fumbling 5 times in short order and losing fumbled punt return chances twice in 2 weeks. If Will Levis isn't benched from having a really bad game, is he going to lose Jaquan Jackson? And do we give a shit if he loses Jaquan Jackson?
I was going to say, from what?
Yeah.
I think it was either Teron or somebody else kind of followed up with that same line of thinking. Like, well, what is? Let's be clear, Coach. What are you saying here? And sort of this is where he kind of gives some of those examples of how a benching can affect the locker room, et cetera, et cetera. Here was Brian today on the follow up.
I think the easiest way to say it is that there's a standard of play, and there's been multiple guys on our team that we've sat down for performance. Guys that we went through the right tackle position all over the place. We've made changes at linebacker, we made changes at safety, we made changes at returner, and so those are all things that are just a part of NFL life and a part of performance and trying to win football games. And you just have to make sure that when you're making decisions and you're coaching, that's the same across the board for all positions, and the quarterback position is a part of that as well.
All right, so Paul, I'm going to give you a hypothesis or a theory that I've got on where the Titans are going at quarterback in just a minute, but I want to dive into this. I was listening to him in real time talk about this, and I was kind of frustrated because Callahan's generally very thoughtful and very articulate when he wants to explain something, and I felt like he was kind of struggling to explain what I feel like is when making decisions about your starting lineup at this juncture of a season, you have different angles to consider. And the 3, I wrote down 3, which is what is the best thing to win a football game right this very second? That's number 1. Number 2 is what's best for my team long-term from a development standpoint. So what's best for the player, not just in this moment, but longer term. And then what do I need to consider about the culture of the team that I am building? And the locker room element seems to fit into that culture thing. Development would say Will Levis needs to be the guy, at least for the foreseeable future or for the rest of the season. And if you want to win now, it sounds like he doesn't know what the answer is to that question and he needs a couple of days. Is that a fair way to sum up that entire conversation?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you want to win now, it's probably Mason Rudolph, though, he admitted Mason Rudolph, was throwing easy checkdowns that the Bengals were surrendering. And then the one time that he tried to sling it, he got picked off, which wasn't any better. And there was a messed up exchange in that as well. Though then he hearkened back to, what Mason did when Mason started the 3 games. But I just think the fan base is a little confused. The fan base was very anxious for the Titans to tank. and now when Will Levis is
helping with that process.
3 more games of Will Levis development probably coincide with their best chances to lose. The anger at Will Levis is trumping their desire to lose, and I just think the fan base needs to pull back and kind of acknowledge it's 3 games. They dedicated the season to Levis, and I think it makes the most sense to give Levis these 3 games. What if he were to bounce back from that and show you something? I mean, I don't understand why the decision and everything has to be written in stone right now.
Honestly, I think you could argue that from a development standpoint and a chance to win standpoint, that Will Levis gives you the best chance for both of those answers. The only real answer to benching Will Levis is what Brian Callahan was sort of loosely referring to or directly referring to, which is you got to try to balance the locker room dynamics of like sort of equality, for lack of a better term. You want to treat people fairly and give everybody the same chance. And I think that, to your point about the conversation in the press room after the fact, is, well, does that rule even apply to quarterbacks, in particular young ones that you're trying to learn about? And I think that's a fair question, because if it's just a kick returner who's a 6th-round pick who doesn't help your team in any other way and he screws up, you put his ass on the bench.
Or Jerome Baker, Jerome Baker have a beef if Will Levis plays and he thinks Mason Rudolph is slightly better. And, you got people in here, Chef Rand, saying the season's over. The season's been over for weeks. I mean, so the season's over, and now you say, well, that's it for Levis. There's 3 more games of evidence and resume and whatever. That's not going to hurt to get. Like, that's something you can still get. Get it.
Andrew says season was over 2 years ago when we drafted Levis. That's not funny, Andrew. So let's throw a few comments in here. Austin says, if we knew this team was bad 6 weeks ago with low expectations, why are people more upset now?
Yeah,
especially if you have more information.
They're upset because it was, in a season of bad games, it was an exceptionally bad individual performance by Levis. But this desire for punitive measures, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to equate it to something personal. I'm trying to think of, which bad Yankee had a hand in blowing that 5th inning of that 5th game.
Aaron Judge.
Aaron Judge is a great player. So, I was going there, but that's not a good Will Levis comparison.
Yeah, I know.
I understand being angry at a guy, but in this circumstance, I just don't understand what Mason Rudolph, why do you want to see 3 games of Mason Rudolph?
Yeah, it doesn't sound, there's not a lot of reasons there. Because I think to your point, the locker room component that I appreciate that Callahan is thoughtful enough to be considering, it means he understands like the psychology of leadership, and that leadership is complicated, and that leading a group of adults is complicated. And I think that's an enlightened way to look at culture. I don't think I can't make the argument for Mason Rudolph in any, there's not a bucket that makes sense to me to put
Cheeto Awuzie was the one player that we talked to today. And we tried to press him on this, and he was like, I'm on defense. I meet on defense. I meet as a defense. I meet with corners. Like, I don't know about the quarterback. And we were saying, if a guy's underperforming, how important is it to you that you see the equity that Callahan's talking about? And he was like, you're asking the wrong guy. So there's a veteran who, doesn't particularly care or want to be involved in this. So to me, his answers made Callahan's thing, well, it's not relevant to him.
I don't think that Cheeto fully understood what you guys were asking him, to be fair.
Well, we certainly gave it several shots.
You did. It was very awkward for everybody. But it's a hard thing to explain. Like, hey, if you're not the guy that we're talking about, it's hard for me to even explain it. And my job is to explain things like that. Like, it's hard to explain. Like, well, no, if you give, because the Predators are dealing with this right now. When you treat star players, or in this case, a quarterback because of his role, in a different way than the rest of the team, how does that impact your view of the coach's ability to manage the roster? Like, that's a complicated thing to explain to folks, especially a player standing up there. It's a nuanced thing. And I tend to agree that players understand the quarterback's a different position. Like, it just is. It just doesn't apply. All right.
Eddie said, put that Eddie comment up.
Is this
guys want to win?
Okay. All right. Let me scroll to the bottom here. Guys want to win games. Okay. So Eddie says guys want to win. Guys want bonuses. Fans may want to take tank. Sorry, but 53 guys want to do as well as possible for their pocketbooks.
I agree. Guys want to do as well as possible to set themselves up and everything, but there are not many bonuses for winning. So, like, winning isn't earning them money. Like in the present, winning is earning them money because their resume is better and it helps them get a better contract or not get cut and all of that stuff. I agree. But it's not like the Titans winning in Indianapolis on Sunday earns them more money per se, connected to the result.
It's even more granular than that. I'm going to put a good singular rep on tape, and I'm going to have my agent cut these 14 great reps together into a supercut and send it to general managers. Or it's not how it works, but you know what I'm saying.
You're significant enough that general managers already seeing that. If you're, the 50th guy on the team, then maybe your agent needs to do that.
Right. So here's the one question I think Ed is hitting on here. We can all see the lack of production from Levis, but how should we measure Callahan? Isn't there the same amount of damning evidence with him? And I do not agree with that necessarily. I think it's fair to be critical, and I think it's totally okay to pick apart things that he's done that we could say that's something that a new first-year coach is going to have to get out of his system. But I don't think yesterday was about Brian Callahan.
Well, he's working with what he was given. Now, you can argue that he hasn't improved Will Levis's game much. And then the other side of that is that Will Levis simply doesn't have great pocket awareness and never will. And that Will Levis is not a great decision maker and never will be, and all of that stuff. And so for, those first 3 or 4 games after the injury, Will Levis played a pretty reasonable level of football, and that might be about as good as you're going to see him. And you could say, well, Brian Callahan got pretty good football out of this quarterback in that stretch. And yesterday, and in against Jacksonville, when he couldn't see Chigakonkwo flashing open on the left side of the end zone on second read, that Will Levis defaulted to bad Will Levis, which is Will Levis is doing, not Brian Callahan's doing.
Yeah. All right. So I got a hypothesis. It's not rocket science, but I'll float it by you and we can kind of work through each part of it here coming up in just a minute. But before we do, Sinkers Beverages, of course, our great and amazing local sponsor, 4-time liquor store of the year. So my wife has a team of people that work for her. She's got to pick out a Christmas gift. A great way to pick out Christmas gifts for clients or coworkers or people who work for you, part of your team, is to swing by Sinkers Beverages. Talk to my guy, Grant. We tried 3 different bottles of champagne because that's a great Christmas gift for people on your team. And we went and we picked it out. We tried all 3 of them. We picked out the one we liked, and now I got a case. I'm going to go on Tuesdays because you can get 10% off wine and champagne on Tuesdays at Sinkers Beverages. So I'm going to swing by tomorrow. I'm going to buy the box of booze so that we can put them in little bags and get the little card on there and give out a nice Christmas gift for everybody on the wife's team. So if you're looking for a good Christmas gift, Sinkers Beverages. If you're looking for stocking stuffers, Sinkers Beverages. They got all kinds of bar equipment. They got cool glasses, mixers, shot glasses, stirrers, muddlers, you name it, they've got it. And frankly, they have some good merch if you want to support good local business as well and rep their gear all over the city. Make sure you're doing that. And, of course, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Just the best brisket in the city. Full stop. Tony's Magic Green Beans. You got the jalapeno cornbread, the whole deal. Make sure you swing by Shotgun Willie's Barbecue in Madison, but it's right off Bradley Parkway, very convenient to every area of the city. Somebody in here saying, Andrew says, whispers, Robinson was actually a really good GM. I think Robinson had some good stretches. At the start, he had some good stretches, and then he made some bad decisions, and that's sort of part of the job, part of the game, and it wasn't all that special. So
drafted a guy who played 4 snaps in the first round.
in the NFL. Not 4 snaps for the Titans, 4 snaps in the NFL.
Traded A.J. Brown in order to draft Traylon Burks. I mean, some of these things just speak for themselves.
Yeah. I don't think we have to talk too much about J-Rob. We'll do that in the offseason. So here's my theory on this, and I'll see what you think, because I do agree with you. I don't think it serves any purpose for almost any reason to play Mason Rudolph. I don't think he gives you a better chance to win. I don't think you're going to have as much fun as a fan watching Mason Rudolph. And certainly it doesn't help Will Levis get some more reps and maybe show some progress. Maybe is a big word in that sentence. So when that happened, I looked over at JT next to me when he got benched. I said, I don't think this is the end for Will Levis. I think he's coming back and he's going to start the last 3 games of the season. That's what my thought was. But I do think that we are nearing a point, if not already there, where Brian Callahan has made his final decision on Will Levis. I have a feeling, because when you look at all the questions about Levis coming out of college, at Kentucky, through the draft process, under both Vrabel and now Callahan, the issues that were there on his scouting report are still the same exact issues that we are seeing him have problems with: processing and accuracy. Those are the two most important things for a quarterback to have. Brian Callahan has said those two words before, and I don't think he processes, and I don't think he's accurate. And I don't know if, you're with me on this, but I think there's a chance that Brian Callahan, who this is not his player, we said all along he can cut bait with Will Levis more than anyone else in the organization. He is not his guy. He didn't pick him. And you can just sort of ride with Will Levis, knowing full well that behind closed doors, you're like, I don't think he's the guy. I don't think he's the guy. And this is, again, not some earth shattering thing. My theory is that long-term, the decision is now made. And that in the short term, it still benefits the team the most to have Will Levis play games for the next 3 years, or the next 3 games. Excuse me.
3 years.
Excuse me.
What a death sentence.
Excuse me. But like the guy is, and I thought Tannehill, and I actually, my biggest complaint, I don't know how you feel about this. My biggest complaint with Tannehill is that I felt like when the play was set up to work, he was very good at executing the play. But if it took the quarterback to see things, to adapt, to play the 4-dimensional chess pre-snap, I didn't think Tannehill, I didn't think he was great at that. And I think Levis is like a lesser version of him in this situation. He doesn't see the field. He doesn't have the pocket presence. If the play is set up perfectly by Callahan and it's executed well, he can absolutely make a big play. But that if it takes the other stuff, the instincts, the intuition, the ability to see things, anticipate, process, and adjust, I don't see any of that. And I certainly don't see any of that in the red zone.
Yeah. Well, I think that you're dead on there. And that's just where they are with him. Can he get slightly better at some of those things? Yes. Is he ever going to be great at those things? No. If you put him on a team where, the offensive line is substantially better, so he has more time and his pocket presence doesn't have to be great because the pocket is a pocket more often and for longer, that helps him. If he's got better receivers and targets, that helps him. If the defense is getting him the ball back in advantageous field position, that helps him. So, that's why I think he's a guy that could resurface in 3 years in a better situation and be, Geno Smith or Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield potentially, given more time, some time to sit with a good coach behind a good quarterback somewhere and be, one of those second act kind of quarterbacks with limitations. But that's probably about where I consider him. I can't help but be driven crazy by Andrew Cooper's comment here that Isaiah Wilson was a COVID draft and everyone missed. After Isaiah Wilson was the 29th pick in the draft. T. Higgins went 33rd. Michael Pittman went 34th. I mean, Jonathan Taylor went 41st. Antonio Winfield Jr. went 45th. There were lots and lots of good players. Jalen Hurts went 54th. There are tons of good players. Plenty of teams had good COVID drafts. John Robinson used COVID as an excuse for having a bad draft. Well, what was the year after COVID? What was the excuse for the A.J. Brown trade? We're not going to relitigate John Robinson here, but don't tell me that he didn't end badly.
No, he definitely ended badly. Austin says, is there a possibility that Levis is Vrabel's guy and not even Rand's? I would say no, and I think you've actually done a little bit of digging on this.
My understanding is that everybody, and this would be Vrabel, this would be Ryan Cowden, this would be Rand Carthon, this would be national and regional scouts, all were on board with Will Levis at that position at the top of the second round, that they thought, love the arm, love the moxie, love the physical characteristics, and thought he had a chance to do kind of what Ryan Tannehill had
Yep.
done.
I do think the skill set that, to your point, he could surface again. I think the skill set that gives him a chance to do that is sort of just the work ethic and the passion about the game. Like, he's a guy who's every chance he's been told no, he goes out and proves to everybody that they're wrong, and he does it. I do think at some point you get promoted beyond the point of competency, and at this point, he might be there where NFL defenses are too good. They're too fast. They're too complex. You have to anticipate every single thing. And like I was having a big conversation. We had a big Christmas kind of gathering with a bunch of family and all of our kids, like 5 couples, and they're all asking like, well, who are the best quarterbacks in the NFL? I don't know. Who are the best like who's on that list? And I'm like, look, because Callahan has said multiple times, he goes, everybody in the world is a system quarterback, except for like the best 4 or 5 guys in the world.
Mahomes, Allen, Burrow.
And I'd put Lamar maybe in there too, because he's a unique skill, but like those.
But he is kind of a system. Like, they built a very nice system for him to excel in. Very
true.
Well.
I hear you, but I also think I think the extraordinary talent makes his system about him. And so even then, like after that, you're going like, well, is Kyler Murray the system, or is he part of a system? Is CJ Stroud the system, or is he part of a system? Point is that there's not many humans walking this earth that can do the things with an NFL defense in their face that those guys can do, the way Peyton and Tom and Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees and these guys historically have been able to play the position. So by and large, you need a really great team around you. You need a great system. You need all this other stuff that we don't know if he's got that. Are you with me? Are you with me that you think is there a chance that behind the scenes, because I think they're just like all of us, we have these intuitions about a player when we watch him. Like, I don't think he's the guy, or I think he's got it, right? Like boiling it down to something very reductive. I'm assuming that Brian Callahan had an opinion privately about this player in private moments. And is it possible that he's seen enough information to make up his mind?
Yeah, it's possible. It's probably probable. Like, I mean, I think if there was a broader pool of quarterbacks out there, inevitably almost every head coach, offensive-minded head coach, given a guy with limitations, who, hasn't played great for him out of the gate, is going to say, give me my guy to start from scratch with. And I think he'd certainly say that now, though the pool from which he'll be helping to choose is very thin, which is a concern for every team in the league that doesn't have a quarterback. Coming in, every coach has to like the guy he's inheriting, right? Vrabel had to like Mariota, and Callahan had to like Levis. And so I think it behooves you to attach yourself to his good qualities. So I think Vrabel, smart enough to look at Mariota and say, well, he's a calm guy with a real kind of Zen presence. And you like that. That's a good quality for a quarterback to have. So let's emphasize that. And I'm going to really concentrate on that being a good thing. And I think Callahan doubtlessly looks at Levis. I think the league looks at Levis and says, this guy has physical tools. He's tough. He's got the body you want in a quarterback. He's got the arm you want in a quarterback. He doesn't have the head you want in a quarterback, but let's see what we could do with that good stuff. And I think anybody that inherited Will Levis or that was interested in Will Levis in that draft was thinking that way. Now, most people are probably saying you're getting the downside of the head that we had written down on our draft sheet.
Well, I think you were quick to point this out on your show on Sunday, which is like they're almost two separate conversations. Like what we do with Will Levis. Okay, well we've decided he's not our starting quarterback. Whatever, whenever that happens, or if it does happen, then there's a separate conversation, which is, all right, what do we do with the position? And if the cheapest, most efficient, and best way to build your franchise long term is to still have Will Levis as your starting quarterback, then that is a different conversation. Like, they're two totally I think it's totally fine for Ryan Carthon, Chad Brinker, and Brian Callahan to sit down in a private meeting and say, we've got to find a quarterback. And then with the very next conversation, which is how and who and when,
and for how much.
The very next conversation is, we can't get one right now. And the best way to get one now, mate, and this is where I think it's fluid, because if they are picking 4th or 5th or 6th and there is options on the board, they've got to evaluate that. And if it's the right guy for the job to be a starting quarterback for this team, it does not matter that Rand Carthon was a part of drafting Will Levis 2 years ago. It doesn't matter. If Brian Callahan finds the guy that he thinks is going to lead the franchise, it doesn't matter. You take him. Otherwise, you build the team, like we've said all along, which is good or bad or otherwise, Will Levis is your starting quarterback. You bring in a veteran to compete with him, whatever that might be, probably a cheap backup, and build the team to be better for whoever it is that you do go get in the draft, either 2 years from now or this spring, whatever it might be.
And that's what I think I'm going to write before tomorrow. How much better could this team be if you have to stick with Will Levis or you get a replacement level quarterback, but you fix right tackle, you get an edge rusher, you get a dynamic wide receiver, you tinker with the inside linebacker, you get the safety. You address everything that you didn't address last year, and then you get everybody back healthy in a second year and get better overall production from last year's free agent class and a maturing Latham, Sweat, Brownlee, and maybe another guy or two from last year emerges into a little bit better of a role. I don't know. Is Cedric Gray or James Williams equipped to be your number 2 inside linebacker or something like that? And I think the answer to that is, maybe I'm being unrealistic, but I think you could get to 8 wins if you do all of that stuff and get reasonable. If you got the Will Levis that you had for the first 3 games out of, if you get that more often, right? If you minimize the dud games, right? So if you get them for if you get more of the 4 games you got after the shoulder and fewer of the games you got yesterday and early in the season, which I think is reasonable to expect. I know everybody's got recency bias right now because of yesterday, but if you look at the overall curve of his season this year, it's been on the upswing.
Well, let me ask you, because my brain is immediately going to, what is it that we have seen or learned about this current collection of individuals? And Andrew says this roster isn't close to 8 wins. That's not how the NFL works. Every roster.
I said I was plugging the major holes of this roster.
And I'll be honest, I think every roster is close to 8 wins, the good ones and the bad ones. Like a couple plays away, a couple players away, a couple games away from going from the bottom to the middle and from the top to the middle. It's just how it is. But I think there's nothing about the job Rand Carthon has done. There's nothing about the job that, and some of it's unfortunate, Chidobe Awuzie being hurt and the L'Jarius Sneed trade and Lloyd Cushenberry getting hurt. I mean, Chigakonkwo had his basically the best career regular season game he's ever had yesterday. I don't know if he's a special player at any point in his career, but is he a starter? Maybe. There's not a lot of positives to take. The running game, I think, if you want to say you've got Spears and Pollard set for whoever plays quarterback, I think you're good there for a while. But otherwise, I think Tavondre Sweat and J.C. Latham are going to be good draft picks, but this is all the same stuff we've been over. I don't see how this team wouldn't be closer to the number 1 overall pick next year if you keep everybody intact and bring Levis back, draft Burden, draft a pass rusher. Maybe you get a guard or a tackle later in the draft. Maybe you get a safety later in the draft. I don't know. Let some of the rookie linebackers that played this year in this game get some more reps. I think you still could be looking at, even with all of that, it could help you long term, and it may not help you win more games next year. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm not thinking 8 wins, but I hear what you're saying. Best case scenario, everything works, and we get some answers out of this. I don't know. I think all the issues that Will Levis exhibited coming out of college and that were part of the questions about his success and why every team in the NFL passed on him, barring whoever didn't have a pick, they're all the things that we're seeing today, which is the inability to adapt, be flexible, process before the snap, process during the snap, the instincts. You root for the kid. He's got a great head on his shoulders for all this stuff, but it doesn't feel like it's there. And I have a feeling that the coaching staff knows that. But that's only based on what we're seeing. And if I can see it, I don't know why the expert football guy who's been in the league for 25 years isn't going to see it.
No, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think the coaching staff is surely at beyond the point where it knows what it does and doesn't have. The question is, what it can get instead.
Yeah.
And where that comes from. And, so what's your alternative strategy? Blake Bedingfield, by the way, at paulkuharsky.com laid out 4 potential alternative strategies, that one may be financially difficult, but 3 are financially viable. You'd probably have to overpay to trade for 2 of the guys that he suggests, but it's what people want right now. Like, what are viable alternative quarterback possibilities? So
I mean,
got 4 of them there.
I don't know what Sam Darnold's market rate will be, because I think a lot of it's Kevin O'Connell and the system that he's playing in. I mean, this is also a retread, right? This is also a guy that failed miserably. Now, that being said, it was the Jets, but I mean, you could just, cut Will Levis and cut Mason Rudolph, or not re-sign him, and then go all in with a $60 million contract for 3 years on Sam Darnold.
Well, franchise tag for Sam Darnold would be high 30s for 1 year. So I think that's what you're working against as the baseline. And the other thing is, he's the one guy. And so if there are a couple teams that are in better shape than the Titans and feel like they're a quarterback away, you're going to be in a fight for him. And I don't know how attractive this place is for him compared to whoever else is taking a swing. So and he could get franchised.
Well, with JJ McCarthy there, coming back healthy, I don't know if the plan is to have JJ be the starter next year. I don't know if you want to pay $30 million for Sam Darnold for that. He doesn't strike me as a guy worth $30 million for the season. But to your point, scarcity leads to the value there. It's really hard. I mean, I think the dead cap hit for Levis, excuse me. It'd be nice to have that conversation be done with. $4.8 million next year, and then $2.2 the following year. We're talking costs. The cost on Levis is the beauty of all of this.
No, that's not a concern.
You can do anything you want. You can keep him. He could be your backup. He could be your starter. You could cut him. You could trade him. There's value in all of that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much value there is in trading him. I mean, there's value in having him off your roster, I suppose, if you're going that direction, but you're not getting much.
I mean, if you're drafting a rookie, I'm not suggesting they should, but like if you draft a player, do you really want the 2 of them to be the 2 that are battling it out, or do you want to bring in a veteran who is not going to be a threat? Like I don't know. You can speak to the psychology of that situation more than I can, but I don't know. Tannehill got brought in and was the backup, and there was a lot. It was part of the conversation. It was part of the conversation the whole time. So.
It was hard for him, but I think it depends on the status of the veteran you're bringing in, how good he is, and what the expectations are for him. Is a guy signing here to be the starter? Is a guy signing here to compete? Is a guy signing here to be the backup? He's going to have an understanding of what his role is coming in, and they're going to have an understanding of what role they're giving him coming in. He's coming in to be a clear-cut starter. Well, then Levis is going to be a clear-cut backup. I don't think, Levis can't dictate, hey, I don't want to be a backup and I'm going to be a problem. He's got to fall in line. Right. But if you don't want that, you don't have to have it. I think it's far more likely he's here in some role than not.
It also is what makes the Mariota Tannehill situation so unique, in that you had 2 guys top 10 picks. One guy had played for 9 years. One guy had played for 6 years. And to have, obviously Mariota had been hurt at the end of the previous season, and Tannehill there was a contract element there that Miami was trying to get out from underneath some of the money. Like there was a lot of dynamics in that trade and in that situation, but that was if you think about it, that's an extremely rare situation.
Yes.
And then
once their roles flip, it's not that complex, because most quarterbacks in the NFL are alphas and Marcus was beta. And so when you put a beta on the bench, it's not that complicated.
Man, that's mean-spirited. He was a competitive dude, though. Very competitive, but I hear you. Okay. All right. Here's the other question from Andrew. Drafting Levis set the franchise back 5 years, spent the past 2 years circling the drain, and now we have to bargain bin hunt free agency or start over with another rookie.
This presumes that if you didn't draft Levis, you would have found a good quarterback then, and you can't presume that. So that's folly.
Here's the thing about this, which is even in hindsight, Paul, and knowing what I know about how Levis has played through about a season, right? A little bit more than a season, but in time wise, almost 2 years. I still don't I don't knock them for taking the chance. Like this is a player who was projected top 5, top 8 talent and clearly wasn't, but fell to you and you had an opportunity and you took a chance at it. I don't blame to find a quarterback at that spot for that price point. Because that going back to moving on from Levis doesn't cost you anything in any way. It doesn't hurt you in any way. It doesn't set you back. It's not cost prohibitive. There's nothing there. Would you prefer a second round pick be on this team starting right now? Of course. But I really don't have a problem with taking a stab at that slot in the second round. I just on a guy who fell, I think you could try a lot worse things than try that angle is I guess my perspective on that.
Yeah,
Am I wrong on that?
Point. I get your point. My issue with it is you traded a 4th to get up in the 3rd for Malik 1 year, and then you traded a 3rd to get up in the 2nd. So you've impacted 4 picks. You've spent 4 picks on 2 guys, affecting the 4th through the 2nd round in 2 seasons. That's a lot of capital costs for a team that's got major depth issues and is trying to claw back from some really bad drafts and in the midst of what's now 3 really bad seasons without a hit. So I would now become more doubtful of second and third round quarterbacks. I know, you can't turn your back. Well, because this guy didn't work out, it's not going to work out in that position again. I'm wary of, second round quarterbacks, third round quarterbacks aren't doing it in the league at this stage anymore. Andy Dalton nowadays would go in the first round, I think. Right.
Let's say, okay. So off the top of my head, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, those are older guys for sure. So that's to your point. I'm sort of trying to think through.
I think most of those guys, I think everybody now, there's a quarterback tax and a quarterback eagerness that would push of those guys, at least 3 of them up. Well, plus you've got the 5th-year option that if you're drafting a guy that you really love, early in the 2nd, you're going to trade up late in the 1st to get the 5th year.
And going to the conversation about Drew Aller and Garrett Nussmeier coming back to college because they're not going to be available in the draft this year, I am working on something. I've kind of started the process, Paul. Brock Purdy's a late pick. Derek Carr was a later pick. Those are not exactly all like elite superstars, by the way.
I mean, Purdy is very much a system guy. We talked about system guys before. Is Brock Purdy coming out as Mr. Irrelevant and doing what he did anywhere else? I'd say absolutely not.
Maybe you'd have to be in an elite situation. You could have played for the Packers, maybe the Steelers. You need to be on one of the 3 or 4. The Rams probably. McVay probably could have done something with you, but you got to be in one of the most stable and productive and talented situations in the league to be that. I do think Purdy was obviously totally misevaluated. This is a 4-star kid who played for, and this is what I'm going to work on. He played for 4 years at Iowa State. He was a starter for 4 years. Drew Aller is going to be in his 3rd year next year, full-time as a starter. Garrett Nussmeier is coming back to get another full season of starting. What I think is interesting is experience.
Is there the Bill Parcells requirement list?
Is there a tie in the experiment? Bo Nix has started a shit ton of football games. Jaden Daniels started as a freshman at Arizona State. I'm going to go back and sort of look at the modern world of quarterback play. Lots of starts. Anthony Richardson, not a lot of starts. Bryce Young, right. 2 full seasons of starting. Will Levis, kind of in the middle. 2 seasons, but some injuries in there, transferred schools. I want to go back and sort of see, like, do we still see value and experience at the position in the NFL from the transition standpoint? I want to see. I'm curious. Carson Beck, 1 year. 1 year as a starter, and we're seeing him struggle at the end of this season. So I don't know. We'll see. I think it's going to be. I'm going to dig into it and see what I find. But we'll, let the story take me where it wants.
Parcells' list included, you had to graduate, you had to start. I think 36 games. It might be outdated because there's so few guys that meet those criteria, which were very, very high. But I do think striving, getting close to some of those markers is still something to take into account. And I was not into Richardson because of that inexperience and wildness. And I fear people like that. Shadir Chef Rand points out 4-year starter. I just think he might be close to his ceiling at this stage.
I don't know. Ceiling
of a different game.
Maybe, and his ceiling might be pretty good. The problem with Shedeur Sanders is that we don't know what he looks like inside of a real team. The offensive line's never been built for him. He's had 2 or 3 really good receivers, but that's it. The offensive coordinator, he's not really had a great offensive coordinator any place he's ever been. I think he's one of those guys that will be better because he'll be in a real football situation with like a real football team and a real offense and a real coaching staff, like all this stuff. And for him to still accomplish what he's accomplished basically on pure talent, I think sort of speaks to how good he could be. But honestly, if you look at those guys that are going into the draft next year, I want to look at experience over the next couple of years. Frankly, I want to see experience because I think the gaps in like Josh Allen played a bunch of games at Wyoming, but wasn't great. The numbers weren't great. Bo Nix has started so many football games, and the system parallels between Oregon and what he's running now. And how many starts he had to mature, evolve, and adapt, the adversity he faced. I just think it's beneficial for a player. So I want to dive into it.
I'm still not sold on Bo Nix, and I haven't seen, a ton of Broncos, but I think there are some guys that come in, have that early success, and then the league sees them for a little while and things get harder.
He does have, Chef Rand says he does have Pat Shurmur. Pat Shurmur is not a good offensive coordinator in college football. He has not ever been. So, although the offense was good this year, Jalen Milroe, Cam Ward. Jalen Milroe's started 2 full seasons. We'll look at him. Cam Ward's played a boatload of football games. That's the key. The problem is he's played in Incarnate Word, Washington State, and Miami, and you don't know how that translates to the NFL. So, all right, Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. If you want some meat and some booze, they're your 2 great local businesses to go check out. So there you have it. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. every single Wednesday through Sunday. Great for weekends, great with the kids, great with the family. Go up there, and as long as supplies last. It's in Madison, but it's right there off of Briley Parkway, so it's about 5-10 minutes from downtown. You can get there super easy from everywhere in the city, easily accessible to the interstate. So make sure you swing by Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville, almost 40 years of serving the community, award-winning 4-time liquor store of the year, and the best craft beer retailer in the city. That's some superlatives that I can get behind. And their sister store, if you're up in the north side, if you're in Goodlettsville, if you're in Hendersonville, if you're up there in that area, Gallatin, Madison, whatever, make sure you swing by Bluegrass Beverages up there. I was up there with the family doing some skating stuff for my kiddos over the weekend, and I was like, man, we need to swing by and pick up a few supplies for the weekend. Swung by Bluegrass Beverages, over 50 years of serving the Hendersonville community. Go check them out as well. What is next for this organization, Paul?
Well, they got to make it through these 3 games and begin to assess what's going on. It's going to be a long off season with a huge list of things to take care of. But I think from fan perspective, they want to see that Amy Adams Strunk isn't going to do anything. I don't think they believe it necessarily. I don't think a lot of people believe it. I don't have it written in stone, but I'm going to be very surprised if she makes a move with one of the big 3 at the head of this organization. And so
I don't think that's happening.
That's where we go first.
Here's the one thing that I have thought about, and I think you've said this before, and it's along the lines of all the different moving parts we're talking about, which is trying to give yourself the best position to get a quarterback in the draft. Maybe not this year, but you might, because if you want Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan and Denard Wilson to be the answers to the questions that you're asking. And if they are, then they'll do a great job in the offseason, another good job in the offseason, which means you're probably not bad enough to be number 1 overall pick to get Arch Manning. But if you pick 3rd this year, let's say, or 4th this year, let's say, and you are comfortable moving way back, let's say 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 in that range, could you get a second first rounder next year so that you've got enough ammunition to either go up to 1, 2, or 3, or, I'm just hypothetically, that's the other angle is let the guys do the work to make the team better. you do show improvement and get better. But the fact that you don't want any quarterbacks in this draft allows you to move back and maybe add some ammunition to next year's draft. That might be their best case scenario.
I love that scenario. And you could have the ammunition, but if the teams that do have 1, 2, and 3 next year need a quarterback, they're not trading out of Arch Manning. So
no one's trading out of one. No,
it doesn't matter what you have in terms of trade fodder. To get Arch Manning, you have to suck next year.
No, I agree with Arch. I think that the key is who else is available. Are there other names that are available? And as we all know, if a team's got a quarterback and they're picking 2 and 3, they're going to look to get out of there.
Yeah,
sort of like
got to be better. It's got to be better than this year is shaping up to be at quarterback next year.
I think Nico would be in that class. I do think Lenora Sellers, South Carolina, would be in that group, which is he's been compared to Cam Newton many times. South Carolina had a great second half of the season for South Carolina. Honestly, you could look at Sam Leavitt, the kid out of Arizona State, who's going to play in the playoff this year. He's had a really great year developing. This is way too early for this stuff. Jackson Arnold Jackson Arnold was at Oklahoma. You got Connor Wigman, of course. There's a lot of stuff going on. So
I love the way you're looking over at your board.
Yeah.
There. I've been in that office. I didn't see the board. So the board has gone up since I last brought
it. Has. It has. I don't have college football games to watch anymore until this weekend. So what do I do on Saturdays? I just do mock drafts. It's great. It's great. But Aller and Nuss will be back. I assume Jalen Milroe might come back as well. So
Jalen Milroe would be wise. We know for his football, it would be very wise for him to go in college, but he's very likely the third quarterback in this draft going inside the top 10. And so how much better can he make things? So now you're weighing like what the NIL deal would be for him versus getting the first year of his rookie deal under his belt. Moves on you, Bama.
And I will say this, I think that's a common kind of talking point about quarterbacks with NIL. Like the rookie contract is still more most of the time in the NFL. Like if you're getting $4.5, $5 million, like Nico got paid $8 million total for 4 years. $8 million total, and he's supposedly one of the highest paid of all time. I don't know if I agree with you, but that's the.
Do we know how that's spaced out?
Generally, the Nico deal, we don't have it officially, but it's a $2 million per year. It's based on your appearances and all kinds of other stuff. So is it different for an established guy like Milroe? Maybe do you get a benefit of the doubt? Maybe a premium price for a 1-year contract, for lack of a better term, to come back. I think that's absolutely part of this. So if I'm Bama and I'm Kalen DeBoer, I want Jalen Milroe coming back. Is he worth more than $5 million a year as a quarterback in college football? I don't think so. So,
no.
And I love Jalen Milroe, the player. I love everything about him on the college level. $2-3 million. I don't know. Ohio State just paid $20 million for their roster, and they lost 2 games in the regular season. So
you should really be able to make the case to Milroe, though, that look, this is good money, even if it's not NFL money. And yes, you can go be a top 10 pick right now, but boy, you're going to be so much more prepared with another year with us. So come try to help us win the national title, get another year of seasoning. You go in next year as, probably number 2 pick and so much more ready. Saying all of that, then what's the injury insurance situation?
That is absolutely the conversation. Here's the problem with Milroe, because I would take Milroe over Sanders and Ward as a college quarterback. Those are considered the top 3 quarterbacks in the draft. I would take Milroe as the best player of the bunch for my college team. I don't know if he would be my top list of quarterbacks for my pro football team. And
I feel like collegiately, he's going to make a clutch play.
Yeah.
He's more likely to make a clutch play in a major moment. He's also more likely to be in a major moment.
I do think Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders have the better arm talent in terms of accuracy. I think Milroe's got a ton of ability. Much like Levis, I think scouts are going to see his size, speed, arm strength, and be like, holy smokes, Michael Vick 2.0, but bigger. And the intermediate passing game is still his problem. Now we're getting into scouting reports for 2026 quarterbacks.
Correct you, because scouts weren't saying that about Will Levis, not to a first-round grade degree.
Meaning the accuracy problems? I thought they
No,
were talking about
that scouts weren't saying whoa about Will Levis the way you're making it sound like they will say about Jalen Milroe, because Will Levis wasn't a first round pick and Jalen Milroe will be this year, better yet next year.
I hear what you're saying. I understand that. That makes sense. Okay. All right. Well, that about does it. We're going to do a lot more digging into this subject for a long time coming up. So paulkuharsky.com, of course, Sinkers Beverages, and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Anything else you want to add for the good folks? Thanks for the comments.
No,
for
I'm good.
jumping in there.
Read the shirt.
There you go. Don't block the box is what it
But
says.
lock your locks.
There you go. All right. Thanks for hanging out, PK. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Notifications on, rate, review, subscribe, all that great stuff. If you do not give us 5 stars, you are a hater. We'll talk to you next time.